Welcome to JLive. I'm Laura Mandel, JArt's Executive Director, and it's great to be with you for JLive, our JArt's virtual series of bite-sized conversations about Jewish life and art with the best artists with Boston connections. Today, I'm with artist Carolyn Lewenberg. Welcome, Carolyn.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So as I said to you at the top, I'm so excited to dig into your story as an artist and especially as a Jewish artist. But I want to start at the top because at the moment we are in right now, we are in the thick of the Be the Change public art project. And when we asked you to be one of the 6 Boston-based artists, we just knew that there was something so fantastic that you had to share with us. So tell us, let's start from the top here and tell us about your Be the Change project and your piece that's called Vital Organs.
So I was inspired by thinking about relationships between people and the earth and how to express something that didn't need a lot of words. I mean, I could use lots of words all day. I like to talk, but it's nice to be able to convey an idea without talking. And so I wanted to convey this sort of tenderness between people and plants. And so I chose to create a 6.5-foot tall rib cage with a planter inside that has, I was gonna grow a Three Sisters garden inside, which is an indigenous story about relationships, about 3 sisters who learned how to work together. They couldn't really work it out in human form, but they got it together in plant form. And their relationship is really inspiring people's imaginations, but also nourishing our bodies all over the world. And so wanted to grow the Three Sisters garden inside, and more about that later in the conversation. So I also wanted to make the point that the work caring for plants needs to happen across cultures. People need to learn how to be in community together across different cultures and across the species of plants and animals, and see ourselves as kin with everything that's alive. And so I created a pattern of leaf litter. So like leaves on the ground and hands, and they're all like kind of a similar scale, and that's holding the planter.
So cool. I love that you talk about showing what you're thinking through the work and not just talking about it, because I think the power of your work is that it is so simple and so compelling in what it's telling. I mean, I know when I first came across your work, it was actually the giant nest that you created at the Franklin Park Zoo, which I just love. So I'm actually curious, tell us a little bit about that and like what you think that nest piece tells us about you as an artist.
Well, I definitely love the whimsical nature of it. It's like this massive nest. It's very, you know, the scale is just like, oh my God, I recognize this, but it's just so huge. But it's also useful. It's also a functional platform. You can climb up into it and then slide down, so it's really fun. So that's something that I like to do with my art. I like to make things that are recognizable, but also really different and question, you know, get people like thinking about like, you know, what is this about? Or they don't have to think about it. They can just play with it and have fun. And I also love working with sticks. That was really fun. I got to work with, there were these guys pressure washing bark off of sticks for like a week, and I got to work with all of those sticks in the nest. It's black walnut, which is rot resistant. So they had a bunch of black walnut there that they cut down and stripped the bark off. Anyway, it's just fun. I love wood. It's a really amazing material.
So I love that that's a running theme throughout your work. You're thinking about wood, environmentalism, recycled materials. Tell us more about your background that led you to this way of thinking and being.
Well, I would call myself kind of like a late bloomer artist. I didn't really realize I was an artist until I was like in my late 20s. I went to school for landscape architecture because I thought it sounded cool. But when I graduated from college, I was like, oh, no, I don't want to be sitting behind a computer, because that's kind of what the jobs were, doing like CAD drawings at landscape architecture firms. And so I started working as a gardener. I did the Arboretum apprenticeship. I ended up, after gardening for like a residential company, I ended up working at the Boston Harbor Islands in their office. I was like an office manager, which was hilarious. I'd like answered the phone for my boss. And after that, I got in with their youth program, and I started working with the youth on the islands doing stewardship, caring for trails, clearing invasive species, and community outreach, teaching people about the islands. And so in that role, I started making sculpture with the plants that we were removing. We were removing Oriental bittersweet, which is a vine that kind of wraps itself around whatever is around, and sort of, you know, it'll strangle trees and clog up paths and stuff. And Phragmites, which is a wetland species. And the term, I use the term invasive species because that was kind of is what is recognized by folks, but I think that term is a little bit misleading because they're just successful. They came here from other countries and they are able to thrive for various reasons. And I think humans have a lot in common with a lot of these species in terms of sort of just taking up a lot of space and displacing other species. So, so I try to work with invasive species, successful species that maybe are taking up too much space. So yeah, and also like materials that I find in the dumpster, like these are all, you know, extras from construction projects or just people threw things out. And I love trees. And like I said, I love wood. So why cut down trees when there's like plenty of it around? So I'm always trying to work with what is around. I see it as kind of like a puzzle. And so that sort of puzzle, every project is a puzzle that I sort of create for myself and try to solve through my creativity, and always learning how to use new tools and new ways of attaching materials to each other. And yeah, my work just kind of evolved as sort of an effort to use what's around and recognize its beauty and honor the materials. So the rib cage is all wood from the construction site down the street. I didn't buy any wood for that whole piece.
Well, and I think the reason we were so excited to ask you to be a part of this Be the Change project is that you have been for many years what we are calling an artivist, right? That intersection of art and activism. And even just hearing you speak about the environment and how you've brought together these pieces, it's really an act of artivism. And I think it's such a cool thing that it's so innate in you. And I have to imagine that having grown up in a Jewish home in Newton, that there was some influence in your growing up that maybe inspired this. So tell us a little bit about like growing up in a Jewish home and how you think that might have helped guide you to where you are.
Yeah. So, you know, Newton is a town with like plenty of resources. People are, you know, they have everything they need for the most part. You know, of course, there's always, you know, folks that have different situations, but for the most part, I was surrounded by a lot of wealth. And my mom grew up in Long Island where it was even wealthier. And she talked a lot about how it was just a turnoff for her. Like she wanted to escape New York. She wanted to escape the materialistic consumer culture of New York. So she came to Newton. It just cracks me up. But I grew up listening to her talking about how, you know, she just was kind of upset by conspicuous consumption and just wanted to, you know, she picked berries, we made jam. We did a lot of wholesome nature things together as a family. And so in my life, I've sort of taken her move from where she came from, kind of like one step further to kind of how I live my life. I am very minimal in like my consumption compared to the rest of my family. I think everything is relative, right? And maybe my son will have even less material use than me. And I think that's, you know, or maybe more, who knows, he's his own guy. But as you know, the concept of tikkun olam, that the world is broken, always just kind of like made a lot of sense to me, and was just, I'm always thinking about that it's like not supposed to be, you know, the world's not supposed to be great. You know, Judaism's been around for 5,782 years. That's what year it is in the Jewish calendar. And so have Jews known for that long that the world is broken? Like, has it been broken like the whole time? You know, I think about this, I'm like, okay, so everybody's been talking about how the world's broken for like thousands of years, and it's just getting more and more broken. And so like, what is it in our tradition? Like there's these, you know, the concept of tzedakah, which is, you know, the foundation of this Be the Change project. That's like one way of dealing with the brokenness, is to, you know, reallocate financial resources to where it's needed. But it just kind of blows my mind to think about, like, Jews have been talking about how the world's broken for like this long, and it just keeps getting worse. So, okay, maybe we don't have the answer, and that's okay. We don't have to have all the answers. And so I think in this Be the Change project, my point about cross-cultural care is like, at the root of that is like, what can we learn from other cultures about how to fix this broken world?
It's really beautiful. And to think about the fact that for over 5,000 years, we've had this idea of repairing a broken world, but haven't yet been able to do it, is kind of overwhelming and inspiring all at the same time. Okay, so I know that it was a little bit ago, relatively recently, that you met Rabbi Shoshanna Friedman, who it has become a dear friend of mine, but is also our collaborator and lead on the Artist Beit Midrash that we run with Hebrew College. But I know that Shoshanna really had quite an impact on you. So tell us a little bit about what Shoshanna said to you that really resonated, and how she's sort of become your rabbi in a lot of this work.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think we really bonded around two important books. One, The Overstory by Richard Powers. When I spoke with her about that book, she's like, that's one of my sacred texts. I have it like next to the Torah on my desk. And Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, which is on equal footing for me in its importance and instructions of how to be in relationship with our plant relatives in a way that honors them and creates a more balanced world. So I think that, you know, connecting around those books has opened up conversations in other ways of like how Judaism is addressing climate issues, and how, you know, what Jewish texts have to say around different parts of the creative process. So in the Artist Beit Midrash, I got to be in her group, and we talked a lot about, you know, some of the creation story. Art is a creative process, and thinking about the creative process and the process of God creating the earth. Like, what can we learn from some of the framing that is offered in the Torah, and how to care for the earth. This is a Shemitah year. And I really enjoyed talking with Shoshanna about the Shemitah year. So Shemitah is every 7 years. You're supposed to let the land rest and lie fallow and just kind of see what comes up. And you can harvest what comes up, but you're not supposed to, like, you know, vigorously work the land. And so, so it got me thinking about, like, so Jews were indigenous to a place a really long time ago, and a lot of our religion has formed in a diaspora. A lot of the like midrash and stuff like that kind of came out after we had been disconnected from our homeland, and also not allowed to own land or care for the land in a lot of places that Jews were ended up being displaced to. And so, you know, I want to talk more with her about this, about you know, what we can learn from our ancestors, like when they were, I mean, there's like these little kernels, I think, throughout our religion of instructions of how to care for the land. And that comes from when we were indigenous to a place. But so much has changed, and how can, so I'm really interested in how to kind of, it's like a puzzle, back to the puzzle idea of like, what are the pieces that we still have, and what are some pieces from other cultures that we can kind of create a new puzzle that actually like suits our world. Because the truth is, like, we do live on we are foreigners. This is not our home, our land. So we came here in the settler colonial movement, and so how do we care for the land? How do we become welcome guests in this land? And I think that we have to cobble together a lot of the different cultural instructions. You know, not everything works, some does, but Shoshanna's been a great thought partner in thinking through all this stuff.
I love your framing of this, and I'm excited to see where some of this learning and thinking is going to take you in future projects, because I can see some really beautiful things coming out of this line of thought. So I said 20 minutes would go by fast, and it has. We have a few minutes left. So before we wrap up, what I would love to do is talk a little bit more about some other pieces you've made in the past. Tell us about some of your favorite works that you haven't already told us about.
Okay. Well, I'm almost done with a meditation labyrinth. I just have been working on it this week. And I'm so excited about this labyrinth. It's in Medford. It's right next to Andrews School. And I got to work with like contractors. They poured this concrete cap, and I got fieldstone from Maine and placed it all around the sites. These 3 spirals that you walk through. And I'm collaborating with a poet. His name's Terry Carter. He's the Medford Poet Laureate. And we spent some time in the meditation labyrinth on Monday, and he was like, oh my gosh, this is like a jewel of salt and light. And I'm like, oh my God, he's gonna put the like magic words to this magic space. And it really is. It is like this special. I made this arch with wood that I salvaged from the zoo. Franklin Park Zoo service yard is like my go-to spot. If I'm stumped and I'm like, I don't really know what to do, I think I just need to find the right material, I'll call up my guy over at the zoo, be like, can I come see what's going on in the zoo? But I've done a couple projects over there that I really loved, besides the nest. I've worked on, and they have an organic garden. And so there's like this really wonderful area with like nettles and mushrooms. I found morels in the zoo. Yeah. Anyway, but other projects, I'm excited about my buoys. I did these buoy starburst it's a buoy starburst project in Hull, and I've been distributing buoys. This was like 3 years ago, I think, but it's still one of my favorites. I got to work with 144 people in the town of Hull, and there was elementary school students, middle school students, high school students, Hull artists, Hull Pride, and we did this like fundraiser event. And I painted buoys with people, or I gave them paint. They painted their own buoys. But we talked about buoyancy and like what keeps you afloat. And so I think that's like the thing I like to do in my projects is have a topic. We talk about it and make art together, and then put it together. And the buoy starburst, they just looked they looked good. They looked really, really good. So that was really fun. There's another project I'm just wrapping up. These fireflies. There's one fleet of fireflies in Somerville. Those guys went in the spring. And then there's some more fireflies going in Everett at the end of the month. And so the fireflies are both in like restored habitats. So the one in Somerville was a lawn, and the one in Everett was like an overgrown area along the Malden River. It had been taken over by Phragmites, and it was polluted. And so the city worked with an engineer to clean it up and planted all these native plantings. And so the fireflies are going in in these areas where like real fireflies will finally have habitat, because fireflies and other, you know, meadow species are being lost because their habitat's being taken for development. And so I've been able to work with school children, sixth graders in Somerville. It was 32 sixth graders in Somerville, and a collaboration of eighth graders and first graders in Everett to create the wing designs. So they were reflecting on community, like what is community? It's not just people, it's also plants, insects, animals, birds, you know. And so they did these wing designs that were inspired by community members that are not human, that they felt kin to. And so all of their designs sort of like reflect this idea of community. So I'm excited about the fireflies.
Very, very cool. I hope we will all get out and see those. You've seen a little taste of them, and it's so nice to hear from you about them, Carolyn, but I'm excited to get out and see all of this. And I just have to say, like, the way you root all of your pieces, as you said, in Tikkun Olam, in social justice, I feel like, even though you said I grew up in a Jewish home, but I don't, you know, always consider myself deeply Jewish, I would beg to differ that it's so interesting how this like theme of really like making the world a better place and Tikkun Olam really just runs through everything you do. And I think it just is, you have a really special way of seeing the world and creating pieces that let us understand how you see it. So you have an incredible talent as an artist in that way. So thank you for bringing all this work to us. I hope everybody out there will go ahead and check out the couple blog pieces that Carolyn has written in relation to Be the Change. Check out the Be the Change piece and some of her other works. And Carolyn, it's been such a delight to be with you today. Thank you for sharing some of your story. And we look forward to talking with you more. Have a great one.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura. It was so nice chatting with you.
Absolutely. More to come soon. Talk to you later. See y'all soon.
Bye.